Hi, I've been asked to do this video and hope that it will be helpful to others. I know it will be helpful to me because I've spent hours, hundreds of hours now, helping people with this information. First, I need to make sure you understand I am not an attorney. This is basically a summary of a legal strategy that I did run past a group of attorneys and legal experts and had compared it to hundreds of documents that I looked at and other legal strategies out there. And this is the one that they all unanimously agreed was a sound legal strategy moving forward to help with the vaccine mandates. So first I wanted to also talk about one of the common things that you'll hear about these mandates. There's a lot of talk about, is it constitutional or not? Obviously, most of us think it isn't constitutional, but the reality is that there are people on both sides of this ideology that have legal arguments, and it will be hashed out in the courts at some point. Here in Washington, our courts are fairly corrupt, and I'm not sure how it will play out. I don't even have a lot of confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court, so I'm not sure how that will look, but that's really neither here nor there when it comes to the vaccine mandates that are already upon us. So this is the time to kind of put aside that argument. I personally think it's extremely wrong and a huge violation of many things. But again, we have to deal with our current reality. So our governor is he's a Marxist, crazy dictator, and our legislature has been empowering him. But I want to just try to get down to the chase of the basic tenets of One Washington's workshop, which is where I divine this strategy and that I'm sharing with you. Who is One Washington? They are from a group of people from Harborview Fellowship in Gig Harbor. They fought Inslee during our lockdowns and won. And essentially when his team entered their motion to dismiss the case, they pretty much said, we had no plans to enforce this. They didn't have any punishment from us. And, therefore, there is no argument. So what that basically did is pull the curtain away a little bit from the Wizard of Oz. And we see that he's just a tiny, well, to quote one of the Gold Star moms recently, she was talking about Biden, but he's a feckless wimp. He's just absolutely trying to intimidate and bully people through his means, and our legislatures empowered him. So those are whole other issues that have to be dealt with. We have supposedly two options. One of a medical exemption, which Inslee is making extremely hard to obtain. He's put incredible pressure on medical providers, and they face even threats of losing their license if they help people obtain medical exemptions. So if that's the route you're planning to go down, this video isn't for you. This video is focused on really obtaining a medical accommodation is what it would be considered, or an accommodation, not medical accommodation, but an accommodation based on your deeply held religious belief. And one of the things they talk about at One Washington is how important the tone is. In dealing with this, you want to have an attitude of humility. You want to be respectful and workable. I mean, you want to have your job. You just want to be able to continue your job without discrimination. Now, in breaking it down to the deeply held religious belief, this is a full stop here. Does that fit you? Because if you have a deeply held religious belief that you should not get this vaccine, then it doesn't matter if you get your exemption or not. You are not getting the vaccine. There are people who are willing to stand up for their faith and who have deep convictions. If that's you, then this process is for you. If it isn't, then and you're just trying to buy time, then there's some good news. Most likely, Inslee's going to delay the time frame a bit, but this would not apply to you. And that's really important because one, Washington stresses that you need to have complete honesty, integrity, and conviction when you go this route. So if this is just a ploy for you, that's not the route. Just go ahead and do whatever approach you're talking about taking. But if you do, in fact, have a deeply held religious belief that you should not have this vaccine, then let's keep going. You don't want to get trapped by specifics on this either, and I'll explain why. When I say trapped by specifics, I mean you don't want to argue with your HR about mRNA or the aborted baby cells that are in these, or the adverse reactions, the graphene oxide, any of those things. I have researched a lot about these vaccines, and I have lots of reasons that I don't want to take it. But if the focus of your exemption request is going to be in line with this, it is 100% on your right to not be discriminated against under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That has nothing to do with the details of the vaccine or the details of your religion or how recently you began having this religion. So all those details and the common questions that HR forms will pose of you are irrelevant, and frankly, they should not even be asking them. One, Washington points this out really beautifully in their workshop when they draw a parallel that is probably the most common way I think that we see civil rights applied nowadays. It's usually applied to the LGBTQ community, often to someone who's transitioning or feels discriminated against in the workplace. Now imagine that you are asking for accommodations to be made while you're transitioning, or let's say I am. And I go to my HR and I say I need some reasonable accommodations to be made, and I'm going to be transitioning to be a man. And they say, well, how long have you felt like a man? What makes you feel like a man? Why do you think that, or have you ever had relations with a man before and a woman? And what are the differences between the two? What has made you change your mind? Okay, that's basically what they're asking everybody who's asking for an exemption from this, because they say, have you had a vaccine before since you were an adult? Why is this vaccine a problem versus other vaccines? They wouldn't ask those questions if the issues were different, and they're both protected under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Plain and simple. So keep all responses relevant to that, and don't get sucked into the traps of answering these questions. Now, if you already have, that's okay. There's a remedy for that. But in the meantime, if you're having to fill out an online form that has those questions, check boxes, and no place for you to explain, then don't fill that out. Take a screenshot of it, retype it, and submit it in writing to them, saying that those aren't relevant, that you're seeking an exemption based on your protected rights under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So focus on that, keep redirecting them to that. Also, feel free to work in the damages and pain and suffering that you have sustained because of this. Workplace harassment, feeling discriminated against, set apart, bullied, pressured, the questions they ask, those alone, I know, have made many of my friends absolutely sick for weeks. Everybody has been stressed out. It's all they're focusing about and worrying about. This has been extremely devastating to a lot of people that I know. So focus on that, and there's a reason for it. Not only because it should make any intelligent HR person stand up and realize that this is very shaky ground that they're on, but also it helps you if down the road you end up losing your job because you have a civil rights case, not some of the other tracks that people are suggesting. I'd like to take a quick side note on that because, as I said, I've examined lots of documents. I went to lots of meetings and explored different alternatives. Most of what's out there right now tantamounts to not much more than virtue signaling. Okay, so if someone gives you some forms to take to your HR department or your employer that says they're liable now and makes them aware of all the details that we know about the vaccines, I mean, think about it. Is any HR rep going to fill out paperwork accepting liability? Is any employer going to do that? Is our state going to do that? Of course not. It might make you feel good and you might be thinking you're making some points, but it's not helping you get your exemption. Neither is answering the questions on those forms. You need to focus on what your rights are, state those, and just remain calm and keep plugging ahead. If you are fired after expressing your fear of being discriminated against under the Civil Rights Act, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And the HR departments and our governor and everybody in between knows that. But if you go off like a wingnut talking about the unconstitutionality and blah, 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 it goes nowhere. I mean, great for you, but are you trying to exercise your rights or not? I mean, it comes down to form over substance. This is substance. Those other things are form. So, and you don't want to mix them together. You want to be clear and simple. Do you have a deeply held religious belief that keeps you from taking this vaccine? Then say that. Also, as far as replying and responding to these things, it's fine to email and to ask for a reply that they received your email, but also just as standard practice and anything that could potentially be litigation, always send it via mail, certified mail, return receipt requested. Just good practice. If you haven't done that, it's okay, but it's just a good move to make. Also, what they're commonly doing now is they'll send you one set of forms. Here's how you apply for your exemption. And you think, oh, good. So I filled that out. And, oh, now there's a new set of forms asking you some more trick questions. You fill those out and send them back. You shouldn't really fill them out, but many people already have at this point. Then they ask you for an in-person interview. So in the in-person interview, on that subject, if they ask for that, you need to ask very nicely if it would be okay if you recorded it in the interest of clarity and transparency and integrity, that you would like to have that recorded. They're probably going to say no. That's okay. If they say no, then ask if they would please just submit the questions to you in writing. You have found this whole process to be very intimidating. It's been stressing you out, and it would just be much easier if they submitted their questions in writing and you'll submit your responses that way. They want to try to use every detail that you have provided in those previous forms against you. They want to try to show you to be a hypocrite, and it is intimidating for most of us. So that's a way that you can handle that situation. So the important things to focus on: integrity, do you really mean this, and your deeply held religious belief is the premise for all this. That said, let's talk about the deeply held religious belief aspect. Consider your source. You're going to be talking to people people will be reviewing your paperwork. Those people may or may not share your faith. Probably not. In that case, it would be best to just keep the vernacular that you use fairly simple and understandable to people who are not sharing your same faith journey. So, for example, you might say that, you have a personal relationship with Jesus and you believe in the Bible. If you go too much down the arguments of, my body is a temple, well, then be prepared to have your life scrutinized. Do you have tattoos? Have you eaten junk food? Do you have too much sugar? Have you smoked? The arguments are endless, and they love that one. That's one where they can personally attack and look for ways that maybe you're not living life perfectly. Now, really, again, you just want to focus on the Civil Rights Act anyway. So you don't have to go into the nitty-gritty, and you shouldn't. It's just that that's a common trap, would be that my body's the temple. Also, a little bit too much on the spiritual aspects. I mean, many of us have had personal experiences where the Holy Spirit speaks to us, where we, can hear God directly speaking to us. But that doesn't help you on your HR paperwork, and it's not necessary in order to ask for your religious exemption. So it's probably best to just leave it out. Just talk about the basic foundational things. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not helpful if your personal experience was that, Jesus spoke to you through a burning bush in your yard. I mean, that's incredible testimony. I would love for the Lord to do that for me. That'd be awesome. But if you're submitting your paperwork, it's going to be more of, a laughable issue to people who don't know how God works or care. So they're looking for a reason to discredit you. And you need to be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove in dealing with these. We're dealing with the enemy directly here. These mandates are evil. So those are just, kind of some basic points to use going forward. I'm happy to answer questions. I will also put some links down below of some law firms that I know say they're offering advice. Please do compare the advice that you're getting from different sources, and please try to attend One Washington events. They are incredible. I know that the Pacific Justice Institute is offering free advice to people, and I would just caution you, they have advised people to fill out the forms as they are, which doesn't protect your civil rights. You need to be savvy about that. They also have been advising people to talk about the Holy Spirit speaking to them, etc. Just not the most wise approach, and it does make me question a little bit what their motives are, particularly on the issue of filling out the forms. That's not something that an attorney who's familiar with this type of law would ever advise someone to do. Maybe it's a new ball of wax for them. I'm not really sure. But anyhow, be careful of that. If they're on the right team and really want you to get your exemptions, then God bless them. And I hope that they're able to clean up that advice, because it's not good. But, there are all kinds of attorneys out there. So anyhow, the team at One Washington is incredible. Try to attend their events. I hope this has been helpful to you. God bless you all, and I'm happy to try to help any other way I can. Thank you so much.